Welcome to Let's Get to Work, Reimagining Disability Inclusive Employment Policy, brought to you by the Burton Blatt Institute at Syracuse University. And now, here's your host, Michael Morris.
Welcome. So happy for so many of you to join us today. This is the podcast series, Let's Get to Work, Reimagining Disability Inclusive Employment Policy. We bring you guests from the world of government, from nonprofit organizations, researchers, and others that give us their unique perspective on ways to translate the latest trends and thinking to advance employment policy, employment opportunities, and economic and financial health for people with disabilities. I'm so excited today to introduce our guest, Finn Gardner, who is the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Autistic People of Color Fund. He has a Master's of Public Policy degree from the Heller School for Social Policy and Management at Brandeis University and a bachelor's degree in sociology from Tufts University. He has a wealth of experience and insights he is going to share with us. Finn, it's great to have you here today, and let's just jump right in with some questions. Many of our listeners may not be familiar with the Autistic People of Color Fund. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of the organization and its mission?
The Autistic People of Color Fund was founded by a group of autistic activists, including its primary founder, Lydia X.C. Brown, to address some of the systemic racism and ableism that face autistic people of color. And that includes some of the economic disparities that we experience. And so we started an organization that distributes microgrants to autistic people of color who they may be in need, they may be dealing with unstable housing, they may be dealing with unemployment, they may be dealing with some other financial stressor, or they may just want to work on a project that's important to them. And so the fund exists to help autistic people of color in their economic development, but that's not all we do. Last year, we started expanding to public policy work as well. So this year, we released the Community Policy Priorities Report, which lays out our goals as an organization, like which policies we want to promote. And so it included housing, employment, healthcare, education, and food justice. So today we're, of course, going to be talking about employment, but I think all those issues kind of tie together because they're all parts of living and thriving in the community. And so that means being able to go to good schools. It means being able to have a job that gives you meaning in life and that allows you to support yourself. It means having a roof over your head. And even beyond that, it just means having a house that's accessible, that you can move around in, that's safe. Yeah, it means being able to live and thrive in the community through being able to have food on your table, food that works for you, food that's not going to make you sick, food that works with your sensory needs. So these are all parts of living. They're all parts of existing in the world as an autistic person of color without the threats, without the insecurity, without these uncertainties that we currently face.
You've laid out a lot of issues. Your organization, as you said, offers funding to people with autism of color. You have talked some about the policy and advocacy goals for the organization. And what I particularly appreciate is we don't live in separate corridors in terms of when we talk about employment as a policy goal, it really does connect with health equity, disability justice. For you, as an individual who has a life experience related to intersectionality, what does intersectionality mean to you?
Okay, I think that intersectionality means that no social category or, no social category, whether that's race, gender, sexuality, disability, economic status, none of those things exist in a vacuum. None of those things exist separately from one another. If you're Black and disabled, for example, as I am, you're going to experience both racism and ableism. You're not they're not separate. And like, for example, and often people will experience overlapping kinds of discrimination. For example, if you're Black, you're often thought of as being less capable, less intelligent, less competent, less able to navigate the demands of the workplace. The same goes for people with disabilities. You're thought as being less capable, less intelligent, less able to navigate the demands of the workplace. That's the case in both situations. And if you're Black and disabled, then you're in a double bind, because you're going to be thought of as doubly less capable, and you're going to have to compensate for that, and work about 10 times as hard, as the saying goes, to be successful in the workplace, because of all this prejudice, because of all this discrimination, and the effects compound. It's like compound interest, compound discrimination. And if you add gender on top of it, if you're a woman and you're Black and disabled, then you're all going to be thought of as even less capable. If you have multiple disabilities, if you're an immigrant. And so you're going to be dealing with all kinds of stereotyping and discrimination, because you're dealing with multiple different identities and experiences and kinds of marginalization at once. And so to read more about intersectionality, I would recommend reading the work of Kimberly Crenshaw, who developed the idea. And she was talking primarily about Black women, but people have extended the concept since then to refer to people of color with disabilities, or LGBTQ people of who have multiple queer identities, and so on. So but yeah, the original idea was about race and gender, but I think that the idea has expanded beyond, the idea has extended to other identities and other experiences. And I think that it's a useful framework to understand the experiences of autistic people of color.
And what you've shared is really gives our listeners a greater sense about what does intersectionality mean. How about for your own life experience? How has your life experience shaped your vision and advocacy? You have this very important new position to focus on public policy and advocacy for the Autistic People of Color Fund. How has your experiences shaped your vision that's going to shape the advocacy in this new role?
Okay, well, I am, an autistic person of color myself. I've dealt with systemic racism. I've dealt with things like educational exclusion, disproportionate discipline in school. I've dealt with unstable housing. I've dealt with food insecurity. I've dealt with anti-LGBTQ discrimination, including from my own family. I've encountered other, forms of adversity as well. And so my goal in this role is to combat a lot of the things I've experienced through comprehensive policy advocacy, because there are ways that these problems can be mitigated, or, I hope eliminated, but at the very least mitigated through policies that are inclusive, that take into account the intersections of race and sexuality and gender and disability and everything else that affects people. And because I know a lot of these problems intimately, that positions me well to advocate policies that will support people who have gone through similar things to me, and others who have gone through different forms of marginalization, but, who are also affected and honestly need the support and guidance they need to live fulfilling and happy lives.
You've been in a number of different positions. You interact with employers in terms of characterizing where we are today in terms of employer culture and behavior in the workplace. Are we making progress related to not just individuals with disabilities, which is too general a term, but are we making a difference in terms of individuals with disabilities of color in terms of what's going on in the workplace, and I've seen now, many employers have hired a lead person with a disability to increase recruitment, increase their sensitivity to accommodation. And they also have a similar person, but different person responsible for recruitment of people of color. And are we getting to a point where these two areas come together to understand, as you've described so eloquently, intersectionality?
I think we need more disabled people of color doing the recruiting and to, and get hiring more people in general, disabled people of color in general. I think that we have a long way to go. I think that there are often cases in which people of color, disabled people of color, are often tokens in their organization. And tokenism is a huge problem. There are often, divides even within each community. For example, there are disability organizations that are overwhelmingly white and do not have many people of color working for them, or if they do, the people of color are not in senior positions. They do not have organizational power. I've seen this quite a bit. Or there are organizations that are geared toward people of color, but they don't have a lot of knowledge or experience with disability. And I think that a lot of it is that I think that the whole principle of intersectionality comes in, you're in a double bind. And also, people tend to think that you can only be one thing at one time. Like, if you're here, you're going to be Black. If you're here, you're going to be Asian. If you're here, you're going to be Latinx or Indigenous. Like, forget about the disability stuff. Or if you are disabled, remember the disability stuff, forget about your race.
Yeah.
And it's just frustrating. And we have, as I said before, we have a very long way to go. Yes, we have laws in place. Yes, we have other like ostensible protections, but in reality, there are still barriers to advancing in our careers or even being hired. God knows how much research I've been doing about disability employment and hiring.
I know one of the bills your organization is supporting is Senate Bill 630, which was introduced last year by Senator Casey. It's the Disability Employment Incentive Act. Can you share with our listeners what changes would occur or are being proposed by this bill to help us understand what you're trying to accomplish?
Okay, so the Disability Employment Incentive Act is a way to get employers to hire and retain people with disabilities in the workplace. And so it's going to enhance 3 tax credits that already exist to support employers who hire people with disabilities and create more accessible workplaces. And so the first credit that is going to be that the bill would enhance would be the work opportunity tax credit. And so this would increase the tax credit for employers who hire somebody referred to them by a state vocational rehabilitation agency, and people who are receiving social SSI, supplemental security income, and people who are receiving SSDI, social security disability insurance. And so this credit would cover 40% of the person's salary for the first year of employment, and then afterward, they would increase but they would raise the amount of the salary considered for credit. So it was originally 6,000, but it would be 12,500. And so they would raise the maximum tax credit to from $2,400 to $5,000. And it would also provide a tax credit to any business that keeps the employee for a second year of employment and lets them take a credit on 20% of the worker's salary. The next credit would be the Disability Access Expenditures Tax Credit. And this would be available for small businesses that with gross receipts of less than $3 million annually, or with no more than 60 full-time employees. The maximum tax credit is currently $5,000, but it would increase it to $10,000. And the final tax credit would be the Architectural and Transportation Barrier Tax Credit. And this would be increased to $30,000 from $15,000. This would be used to remove physical barriers in qualified facilities or vehicles. And businesses would also be able to take the expenses to make their telecommunications and online business operations more accessible. This credit has been around since 1976. The current limit is $15,000. They would double it if this bill were passed.
Excellent. So multiple approaches and strategies, but the bottom line is the same thing, really, to improve opportunity for meaningful work and greater participation in the labor force by individuals with disabilities. Are there other bills on a short list that you are considering or are working on in terms of support?
Okay, so the Transformation to Competitive Integrated Employment Act will help move employers away from using the subminimum wage. So Section 14C under the Fair Labor Standards Act allows employers with certificates to pay workers less than the minimum wage if they are deemed not competitive enough. And so the subminimum wage devalues the work of people with disabilities. It says, oh, your work, we're going to pay you pennies on the dollar to do this work and keep you in a sheltered workshop, which is often where this subminimum wage work occurs, instead of giving you opportunities, real opportunities. And they say it's training, but nobody is actually being trained. Nobody is leaving these jobs. They're just stuck there for years. And in this bill, the Secretary of Labor will award grants, competitive grants, to states and other entities to help employers transition their work by offering competitive integrated employment, by paying workers minimum wage or higher, and by helping people with disabilities find jobs, whether it's with their former employer or somewhere else, and by providing community participation and wraparound services for people with disabilities, and making sure that these services, and as well as non-employment services, comply with the requirements for home and community-based services under the HCBS rule. So they want to make, with this new bill, aims to help integrate people with disabilities in the community, including having integrated employment, because the subminimum wage has been around for a while. A lot of organizations use it. There are there are some of these workshops that pay the subminimum wage will pay people less, only a few dollars an hour, and then the CEO makes six figures.
I think that there are over a dozen states now that have actually outlawed the use of 14C yes. and subminimum wage. So states are moving in the right direction. This bill you talk about, I think another one that Senator Casey is leading on, will really make a difference to begin to outlaw 14C, the notion that you can pay people with disabilities a subminimum.
This bill is also sponsored by Senator Casey.
Okay, let me switch a little bit to the center that's behind this podcast. It's funded by the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. It involves researchers from Harvard, Rutgers, and Syracuse universities. At the heart of the research that's being done, it's looking at disability inclusive employment policy. What do you think that term means? What does that term disability inclusive employment policy mean to you? And why is it important to employers, others with disabilities, and the economy?
Okay, I think that disability inclusive employment means that if you're a disability, there should be a job for you. There should be somewhere where you can work and thrive. It's important to employers because there are a lot of people with disabilities who are pretty good at what they do, but because of their disability, a lot of employers they may write them off. But if employers are educated about disability, if they realize that it's important to give disabled workers a chance, then they might have a lot of important assets. I think that it's important to people with disabilities because a lot of us want to work, but our employment rates are dismally low, and autistic people have especially low employment rates. I think that having that opportunity to be able to earn a living, to be able to do something that means something to us is incredibly important and to society as well, because integrating people with disabilities allows people, like just the general public, to know, oh, wait, oh, here's this person that I work with. Here's this person that's part of the community, as opposed to look at all those disabled people who are being kind of kept away. And I think, and segregating people with disabilities sort of engenders fear and suspicion and stereotyping. And so community integration, including integrated employment, allows people to interact with disabled people and go, oh, hey, yeah, that's the person I work with. This is the person that is part of the community.
When we think about public policy, you talked about one public policy, 14C, subminimum wage, that poses barriers to the economic advancement of people with disabilities. Are there other public policies you would identify that are also particularly holding back people with disabilities of color from really moving ahead economically?
I think a lot of it is more the lack of policies that are protecting us, honestly, because you have the ADA,
Right.
but you have to litigate to enforce it. Like you can file EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission complaints, but again, you have to file them after the fact. And a lot of people who file these EEOC complaints end up losing their jobs anyway. And there are very few protections for things like workplace bullying. And there are a lot of ways that people can get discriminated against during the hiring process without any accountability whatsoever. Because like they can turn you down at any point and they say, oh, we just found somebody who is a better fit or whatever. And of course, the person who's a better fit is white, not disabled, doesn't have the same marginalizations as you, but you'll never find that out because you don't see any, like, it's not as though you meet all the candidates that are being hired for that position. So there's a lack of transparency in the hiring process. And also there are other policies, for example, things like credit checks. There are some jurisdictions that some employers, not just banks, but some other employers use credit checks, and people of color are more likely to have poor credit. And well, anybody who encounters economic difficulties is probably more likely to have difficulties with their credit for whatever reason. Some jurisdictions like New York City ban the use of credit checks in most employment circumstances, but there are no federal laws against the use of credit scores in hiring. And that's yet another barrier to somebody's success, because let's say somebody lost their job and fell behind on their bills for a few months because they were looking for work, they were unemployed, and then they're trying to get back into work and then they don't get hired or they get hired, but that being hired is contingent on a credit check, and then they fail the credit check and then the offer is rescinded. That puts the person in an even worse economic state than they were before. And so there are a lot of policies that the policies that exist to enforce inclusion, to enforce fair employment, tend to be retroactive. They don't catch the problem as it's happening. And then there's a lack of transparency. And there are still policies out there that may not deliberately target people of color, but are unfair anyway. And so again, I think a lot of it is less that there are policies that are directly keeping us out of work. The problem is that there is just a lack of policies, a lack of policies, a lack of procedures, a lack of regulations that exist to protect us.
You make an interesting point. There's ADA, there's Section 504, there's a variety of policies from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, but you'd like to see stronger enforcement efforts being made, whether it's at the federal or state level. That's what is my takeaway. There are a growing number of people with disabilities working from home. Do you think our current laws and policies need to be adjusted? One of the things that I think has really happened due to COVID is an understanding for the first time by employers that they need to be more flexible. And this is actually help people with and without disabilities do their jobs in different ways. It's part of the ADA, reasonable accommodations, but not all employers have really understood what that means. Is there more that could be done related to supporting people working from home?
I think so. I think so. I think that there should be, I think that telehealth should be, at least in some kind of rulemaking, made, an accommodation. Like some people with disabilities may benefit from working fully remotely, but some workplaces are now insisting that people come into the office more often than not. I feel as though we've kind of stepped back from the height of the pandemic, and I feel as though we're becoming less accommodating again, and that frustrates me.
Okay. I know that you're particularly concerned about autistic people of color. I know there are some employers who have really been very intentional about hiring more people with autism. Are there employers you're familiar with that are setting an example for other employers in terms of dealing with people who are autistic, and as well getting the view around what you talked about earlier in terms of intersection with race and ethnicity and sexual identity and things of that sort?
So from what I know, most of the organizations doing this tend to be in tech, and I haven't heard much about an intersectional or racially inclusive focus from them. And so I'd like to see more employers in other fields, in other areas, supporting autistic workers. I find it frustrating, actually, that it's primarily workers in tech and programming, or something's finance, but mostly it is primarily tech. Because there's a stereotype of autistic people that we're predominantly interested in technical or quantitative work, when there are people in the community who have other skills. They could be good writers, they could be good artists, they could be good, they could be good teachers, they could be, good historians. It doesn't have to be technical work all the time, but a lot of these organizations, for example, Specialist Sterna, is probably the best known one. They've been around for about, at least they've been around for like 17 years at least, but they're mostly technical jobs, and I feel as though that ignores the heterogeneity of autistic people's experiences and skills. And I think that it's important for organizations, for companies to, if they're going to be intentionally hiring autistic people, these should be organizations in different fields, not just technical fields. And the input of autistic people is important, including autistic people who are currently working in different fields. So autistic writers, autistic researchers, autistic artists, and so on, as well as autistic people who are looking for jobs in those fields. And so there needs to be an active conversation. There needs to be serious work going on within those organizations, and there should be policies to support that as well.
I want to really focus in a little bit further on diverse and inclusive workforce. What are the gains? What are the benefits of an inclusive workforce? And from your own personal experience and others that you have worked with.
I think having an inclusive workforce allows everyone to feel more connected to the mission of a particular workplace. People are able to feel as though they're part of something. They feel part of a community. They feel connected to the people they're working with. And also, it reduces the stress. People are not going to be going to work worrying that they're going to be marginalized or pushed away or fired or laid off because they're a person with a disability, or they're a person of color, or because they experience some other form of marginalization. I've often, as as an autistic employee, as a Black employee, worried that I was going to be, pushed aside because of my race, because of my disability. And I've worried that I was somehow being treated as, less important or less skilled than my white or non-disabled colleagues. And in an inclusive workplace, I'm not worried about that so much. I'm just glad that we're able to sit down and focus on the work, that we're able to just get things done.
When we think ahead, maybe looking over the next 3 to 5 years, are you optimistic about changes that will occur in business culture in terms of hiring and as you said, in more diverse jobs for people, autistic people of color? And if you're optimistic about what's ahead, what are some of the signs? What are some of the reasons you think things are going to continue to improve?
Okay, well, right now the jury's out because although things have improved since things have improved over the past 20 years or so, we still have a long way to go. So, I'm agnostic right now. I actually don't know. I think that it depends on the national leadership. It depends on the efforts made by not just ours, of course. We're a relatively small organization. It depends on the work of larger organizations. It depends on what's going on in the states. It depends on what's going on among employers. And I feel like we're still dealing with, even if you don't take disability into account, we are still dealing with companies that filter out resumes for sounding too Black or too Asian.
There's a long way to go. You're not willing to say we're making some progress, but not enough, basically.
Not enough.
Yeah.
That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because there is not enough progress. There are still situations like the one I mentioned. There are still people struggling to find work. There are still people who are being just constantly marginalized and isolated. It is depressing and sobering. But I also think that there are opportunities for us to make progress. And I think that depends on the movement of different organizations and people to move towards success. But I think that we have a long way to go, and I think that it's going to be a rough road but I think it's worth it. I think that the results are worth it. I'm not going to lie. It's not going to be easy.
Well, let me just end with 2 last questions. The first is, how can our listeners support the work of the Autistic People of Color Fund? And let me have you answer that, and then I'll close with one final question.
Okay, so the most important thing you can do is to donate to our organization, because so that we can distribute more money to the people who need it. And the URL is awnetwork.org/APOC. That's awnetwork.org/APOC. And through our fiscal sponsor, the Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network, please donate so we can help more autistic people of color get the support they need to stay housed, cover the rent, keep themselves supported while they're unemployed, or to help them fulfill their dreams by working on creative projects or anything else that they may need. And all this money goes to autistic people of color, and we also send out emergency grants for people who are dealing with homelessness, or who are don't have enough money to eat, or who are unemployed or otherwise struggling. So please support the Autistic People of Color Fund by going to awnetwork.org/APOC.
Great. And end with the one last question is, you're relatively new to your position. A year from now, what do you think you could report on policy goals or policy change that you have been particularly instrumental in moving forward?
I'm hoping that we can make some progress in hiring in particular. We are working on an employment brief that includes research about disability, race, and employment, includes statistics about that. We currently have a survey out in the field for autistic people of color to respond. We've already had about 40 people responding. So that's a good sign, and we plan on using this research to advocate policy change.
Finn, it's been wonderful to have this conversation with you. I really appreciate you taking the time to be part of our podcast series. Let's get to work, reimagining disability inclusive employment policy. I wish all the best of future success in your policy advocacy. And again, thank you. You've said many things that I hope will promote change in thinking and change, even more importantly, in behavior within the workplace as well as within employment policy. So thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
You've been listening to Let's Get to Work, Reimagining Disability Inclusive Employment Policy, brought to you by the Burton Blatt Institute at Syracuse University. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.